This is Audible.
Aethon Audio presents 1% Lifesteal, Book 1, by Robert Blaze. Performed by Daniel Wisniewski. Chapter 1. The Passage. The metallic torture device shackled around Freddy's head rang, signifying the arrival of yet another unwelcome morning. The filthy sheets of his tiny bed shifted. With much effort, he freed his arm from the lukewarm embrace of his thin covers. Then, he turned the crank on his headgear alarm. Round and round it went, speeding up as frustration overpowered his morning weakness. The sound of crystal vibrating inside grew brighter, and eventually, the mechanism triggered, the ear-grating ringing stopped, and the lock released, allowing him to finally take it off. He opened his eyes. The depressing gray ceiling of his room greeted him, held up by the tight walls on each side, its corners adorned by black mold. His bed was tucked in a tight corner where he couldn't even spread his arms to their full length. The only light source was the lick of sun peeking through his shades, just enough to see where he was. Pulling the misery-inducing sleep annihilator off his head, he released his shoulder-length, greasy black hair into a short-lived freefall and shuffled to the right, getting up. Luckily, he was of average height. If he were any taller, he couldn't stand upright with the low ceiling. Scooting sideways to reach the window, he twisted the handle. It opened, allowing the sobering morning breeze in, carrying the smell of city-brand Petrichor. Finally, with a lift of the hatch, the shades were pulled aside, and the full power of the dawn, already shining over the tall buildings, entered his room. The sky was particularly blue that day, and the clouds of yesterday's rain still hung on the horizon, journeying to distant lands. Glittering reflections scattered off the floating buildings to the right and jumped off the rooftop puddles everywhere else. "Fuck this shit, man," he groaned. "Why do I gotta work today?" The small studio apartment, or as he preferred to call it, the dungeon cell he lived in, was an old, tiny, cramped living space, and the only home he had. The basket with his clothes hung off the low ceiling. Below it was the old, broken chest he kept his stuff in. It wasn't that big, yet it occupied the lion's share of his room, leaving but a tight L-shaped path from his bed to the door. Picking his work clothes out of the basket, the white shirt, black pants, and red vest, he took a whiff of their stench as he brought them up to and away from his face. He raised an eyebrow. Rancid up close, but unnoticeable from a distance, he evaluated. I hope they don't catch me borrowing the sample perfume again. After draping the uniform over the window and praying it aired out some of the stink, he took another step over a stool and entered the kitchen part of his room, a fridge cramped between the garbage can and the entrance to his apartment. He dragged the stool over in front of the fridge. Opening it and bumping the door into the chest, he grabbed the stale bologna sandwich he had half-eaten yesterday. Closing the fridge again, he pulled the chair closer and sat on it, using the small cooler as a table. His seat was low, and he didn't have the space to sit straight, so he ate head pushed sideways, just barely past the ground. Once done, he gathered the crumbs into his hand and threw them into the trash. The can smelled horrible, with much garbage compressed into it to save on paying the disposal fee. He took his clothes off the window and a toothbrush from a glass on the fridge. Then he put his slippers on, squeezed between the cooler and the chest, and left his apartment, still in his old pajamas. The moment he opened the door, his stomach dropped. His neighbor, an overweight middle-aged man with a massive mustache, was chatting with an older brunette woman outside the toilet. The young man instantly looked at the clock on the wall above the bathroom. 6:43 a.m. Fright turned to anger, and he marched to confront his neighbor. "James, what the hell, man?" The older man jumped back slightly, turning to face him. "Good morning," the man greeted him cautiously as he leaned back. "Is everything all right?" He shoved the older man toward the bathroom. "Get in the toilet and hurry up," he urged. "I'm next on the schedule." The man waved him down. "Relax, nobody will get on your back for being a bit slow today," he said with a chuckle. "I'll be late to work," he declared,